start July 18th at 10 a.m. And we're going to start with the Freedom of Information appeal.
Do you want to make some initial comments since you're the appellate, Mr. Sherwood?
I would like, we have this email go on from the Committee for Open Government where they said that either I should get my appeal denied, or I should have my appeal, which is, I guess, what we're doing right now, and that I'm entitled to a certification that I've been given all responsive documents. And as I said to you, the way that some of the documents that you've provided to me have indicated that there are more responsive documents than what I've received. Obviously, you've sent me pages upon pages of documents, emails that have largely been printouts from Tim Lewis, but most of those emails, most of those tall stacks of pages have been effectively redundant information. So there's really, of the 5,600 or the 6,000 emails that he said that you guys have reviewed, only 80 of them were produced, and the rest apparently were not produced based upon potential exemptions because they're either intra-agency or privileged. However, it seems to me that even after the initial March 17th FOIL and subsequent FOILs, we're slowly but surely getting other emails where people who are not members, who are not employees of the town, so there's no privilege, there's no intra-agency exemption that would be applicable there. These emails indicate that there are additional documents which I haven't received. So that's concerning to me. For instance, this email from Don Cannon to all of you, and Judith, to which you responded, where Don Cannon says, attach is a first pass of risks to Edgemont from incorporation. This is based almost entirely on our meeting and memos from department heads and Paul. Those memos, these details that he's referring to as a member of the public, he's not an employee. You don't enjoy privilege with him. He's not another agency. Where are these documents that apparently Don Cannon is entitled to see, but I'm not entitled to see? Where are these things? And then subsequently, there's an email here that came out in June from an email from February, after my March 17th date, where Paul Feiner admits to the fact that the first time we tried to file a petition, it was filed. And he says, the Edgemont Incorporation, this is on February 21st, not February 27th. On February 21st, the Edgemont Incorporation petition was filed, and we now have a limited number of days to review and schedule a public hearing. That's an acceptance. And then subsequently, David Fried from your office said, I would like no one to forward this information or Paul's earlier email to anyone, all capitalized. It almost seems like the distribution of this information was specifically delayed until after the petition hearing. It almost seems to me like you're looking for us to go through the courts to get the information that we should be entitled to, that other people apparently have access to. And so I ask, in accordance with what the Committee of Open Government said, for a certification. And here's what bothers me. 2 weeks ago, Judith and Tim and I had a conversation in Judith's office, and Holly was there. And in that conversation, we talked about the certification. And that certification was something that Tim Lewis said he wouldn't provide, even though he's the one who performed the diligent search, right? The diligent search, which I've now detailed out several times over on how to go and use a computer to do this search for, CCing for any documents and emails that have gone to Don Cannon or any other non-town employee. And Tim Lewis says, I don't provide the certification. The town clerk has to provide the certification, but then Judith says, well, I can't do it until Tim Lewis gives me that understanding. And that seems like we're creating an end run around the process. You're supposed to provide me with a certification that you've given me all the responsive documents. And I just sort of feel like we're in this vicious, it feels a little bit dubious. So I'd like to sort of come to an understanding if the town, if all of you are going to look at me and say, there's nothing else, we've all reviewed everything, there's nothing else that Don Cannon or any of the list of people that I've put on this FOIL request have seen that you haven't seen, then great. Then provide me that certification, but just come from the town. It shouldn't be one person did the search and the other person has to provide the certification with the absence of knowledge as to what the results of that search were.
Okay, and thank you. And I think you'll get that certification. I just wanted to just start from the beginning, though, because I just wanted to really make a record of where we started and where we are today.
Sure.
So you made your FOIA request back in March, I think, of 2000 and I'm not sure when you made it, but it goes back to March of 2016. Since that time, as I mentioned to you, what happens is the technology department, the MIS department, gets a disk. They give me a disk similar to this, and it outlines all of the emails regarding incorporation, Edgemont's incorporation, Village incorporation, and I have to go through those documents. So these are the documents that I went through, as well as these documents, and I personally looked through each and every one of these documents and made a determination as to whether or not they could be released to you. In addition to these emails, some people had personal documents which were also disclosed to you. Many of these documents are duplicative because the nature of the way you framed your FOIA requests said including but not limited to. That's the way you wrote your request, and I just thought it was better for me to find out what was out there. So I went through all these documents. These are all of the documents that I released to you. And since that time, I've taken the time to put them all in chronological order. The first one I have is from April 17th of 2016. You don't have that. You have it mixed up. But I'm going to send you all of these in chronological order.
You're going to do the same ones again in chronological order?
Yes, I am.
You don't need to do that. Thank you. I appreciate it.
But I'm going to send it to the clerk's office.
Okay.
I want to do that because if this ever becomes a litigation matter, I want it to be easy for a court to see the documents and the dates that I gave to you on each particular date. Let me finish, please. Okay. In addition to that, these are the documents that I withheld. I withheld these documents because they're intra-agency documents. I know you know what intra-agency documents are, but I'm just going to explain it for the record. These are documents that pertain to the deliberative process. What do I mean by the deliberative process? If town employees are communicating between each other and they're making recommendations or suggestions or other comments and are not making final agency decisions and do not have statistical charts here, I withhold those documents because those are intra-agency documents. You've communicated with Bob Freeman, who's the executive director of the Committee on Open Government. I've done the same thing. So I've consulted with him about many of these documents. So these are the documents here. Some of the documents are just exempt pursuant to FOIL, either because they're talking about personnel matters or other things of that nature. In some of these cases, I'm actually giving legal advice to the town board, so they're privileged. So because you've appealed, I've given these documents to the town board to take a look at, and they're going to make a decision as to whether some of the documents can be released.
Why is Margaret Goldberg on that?
Yeah.
Margaret Goldberg, in my conversations with Bob Freeman, because she's part of the town's agency and there's a consulting process there, those documents are privileged. You may dispute that.
I think we need to.
Okay.
How many of them?
Wait a second.
Because
Let me
Margaret Goldberg.
finish. Let me finish, right? You're giving me an
Tim, can
opportunity
you
to
put
speak.
your documents
Right.
down, because obviously
Okay.
Mr. Bernstein wants to read them.
Right.
Well, we have
He's
holding it so I can see it.
That's why I told him to put them down.
Right. So I sent the board these documents. I've consulted with Bob Freeman with respect to these documents. Now you notice there's like a yellow sticky here. There were some concerns about some of these documents with some of the people in my office as to whether they were interagency or not. Most of them we deem are interagency, but we'd still like to consult with the board and with Bob Freeman as to whether or not the specifics of some of them are actually interagency. All right, just so you know.
Is that still in process?
Yeah, that's still in process. A few of them. In my mind, A few of them, all of them are intra-agency, but because you've appealed, we want to make sure that we're giving you every opportunity to,
Can you
move
verify
forward.
whether or not if you're using personal email addresses, whether or not they're still interagency? Because I can see
No, they would not be. They would not be. Okay?
that's her Yahoo address.
Well, okay, wait a second. Let me finish my comments, and then you can comment, and the board can comment. All right? So let's not focus on a specific document. Okay?
This is about specific documents. You get that, right?
Yeah, I get that.
Okay.
Okay? So I just wanted everybody to see that we did disclose a substantial number of documents. These are documents that I deem to be.
Wait, this is your Donald Trump IRS demonstration.
I
These
don't know
documents,
what that
90%
means.
of which are
I don't know what
duplicative.
that means.
Town
I don't know what that
attorney
means.
finish.
Okay?
Sarcasm.
So, as you know, on June 9th, I believe it is, I gave you a copy of all of these documents by email.
Yeah.
Subsequent to that time, you've made a number of additional FOIL requests.
Yeah.
Okay. One of those FOIL requests is for additional documents pertaining to incorporation from June 9th until some date in September. We advised you at the meeting that you alluded to earlier that you can't make a request for a document for a time that doesn't exist yet. September doesn't exist yet, so you can't do that, and you acknowledge that. Now, I know that you subsequently have been making FOIA requests every day for additional documents.
We'll move that down to every week because I just sort of feel like you got the point.
Yeah, that could probably be perceived as harassment, and we don't want to harass anybody. So I'm also going to speak to Bob Freeman
Well, I think
about
it's
that.
not providing you the documents might be perceived as conspiracy.
It might be. So from the board's perspective, I did get an additional disc from the MIS department yesterday. So in the next 20 days or so, I'll be going through each document on this disc. I don't anticipate that it's going to be as many documents as there are here. To look at the documents from June to July 17th, so I can provide you with those responsive documents that aren't interagency documents.
Wait, that disc you're saying is from June of this year to July 17th of this year?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, because all of the other documents that you requested are either in that package or this package. So now we're going forward from that time. In addition to that, remember, it's not just emails. It could be personal communications that don't involve emails. So every department head has been responding with respect to documents that they have, and they provided that information to the town.
Do we have all the text messages on Paul Farner's phone too?
I don't know if the MIS department did text messages, but we'll check that as well.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you
I
had a
don't
question?
really, I'm 20th century, so I'm not a big texter. But the thing is, I just wanted to, ask you if, you don't have a lot of documents, over here, and there may be a dispute, just so we could err on the side of being more open than not open. I'm wondering if we could have made a disc of the, of the emails that we are not giving out, send it to, say, Robert Freeman, have him take a look, and then give us, this way you can maybe confer with him, show him, what you think shouldn't be disclosed, and this way we could get an opinion from somebody who, is totally independent of this controversy, and they could tell us whether your interpretation of the law is, is appropriate or theirs is, because I think that from my standpoint, I basically have told everybody what I'm doing anyway, so I don't really care if everything's released. I mean,
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. Just so you know, Mr. Bernstein and Mr. Sherwin have also been in contact with Mr. Freeman,
right.
and he's been getting inundated with
But I'm
calls from
just
them
saying,
as well as from the town.
Right,
And I'm happy to do that. I just don't know if Mr. Freeman is going to take the time out and look through a number of documents. He's certainly not going to take the time out, as I did, to go through each one of these
but
documents.
you've given out most of them.
I've given out most of them, and I think he's advised both Mr. Sherwin and perhaps Mr. Bernstein that the search that they requested was really very overbroad.
Right.
And it really wasn't a responsible request in terms of the amount of time it requires the town to respond. But nonetheless, because we want to be transparent, as you always say, we did go through all these documents. But I will reach out to Mr. Freeman with respect to selected documents in that pile to see if they're interagency. If he's happy to go through all of those documents, that would be great. But I sense he's not going to want to do that.
You could even actually just, skim through and you could basically say, this is the gist of the documents that, we feel should not be, released, and, if you could just take a quick look at it, and if you feel that there's...
That, by the way,
wait. Because, I'm saying he's an expert on this, and this way, this way, this is not a political, decision. This has to be what the law is, and there's nobody who's more of an expert on freedom of information requests than him. So if he says that you're right, then I would have confidence that you're right. If he says that you're wrong, then I'd say release it.
And that'd be fine. So just to sum up, again, these are the documents that were released to Mr. Sherwin. The documents that, Councilman Jones are looking at are the documents that have been withheld as interagency. In addition, pursuant to another FOIA request he has, we have the disc, which we're going to go through over the next 20 days. I just can't do it in 5 days because there's too much time involved to go through that. And lastly, I want to state that at one point, Mr. Bernstein had said that there was a requirement that we catalog each of those documents and indicate what they were because we were holding them as interagency documents. I've since spoken to Mr. Freeman. He has determined that that was incorrect. That is not the law. That is required if someone sues the town and those documents have to be submitted to a judge, but it is not the law that we have to categorize those documents prior to any type of litigation. So before I let Mr. Bernstein and Mr. Sherwin speak again, I didn't know if any of the board members had any comments, and then we can take further comments from them.
I would just like to know where we are in this process, because we have a revised set of search terms. They're narrowly defined. So I was going to go through and search for Harrington and so forth on the old foil, as I'm calling it. I didn't do that because there's a revised foil with very defined search terms. So I'm not sure why we're having a FOIL appeal hearing on the prior FOIL if you've revised your terms and made it very specific as to what you're looking for, not using prospective dates and so forth. I didn't want to go through that and then find, well, there's another one, you need to do it again because of the revision. So what is the purpose of the revision if we're still here on a FOIL appeal on the old search?
We made adjustments to the March 17th FOIL in May 2nd and then again on May 9th, and then that were narrowly defined and that were more narrowly defined, where we specifically said Edgemont and the word quote any document, like you can put into the MIS system, any document that had the word Edgemont, village, or incorporates or incorporation, and the list of any of the non-intra-agency individuals and non-town employee individuals, which wouldn't require any of this manual search, right? This is what I'm alluding to last time. It appears, for the purposes of potentially, because it politically benefits people who are supporting the status quo as opposed to, incorporation, it appears that going through and trying to manually do in months what a computer can do in minutes is politically charged. If you go and you look at the May 9th FOIL, again, we are outside of the date, and this appeal could conceivably be covering that. There's so much here that I don't even know where we are in this process. That May 2nd and that May 9th and the June FOILs can all be covered if we just simply execute the search and hand over those documents. So I think that some of those parts of those previous FOIL requests are valid and narrowly defined. And
let me try to add some clarity. At the earliest of the appeal hearings, Tim said that in response to the initial request, MIS had generated 6,000 documents. 6,000 documents. That's on tape. And we took him at his word that there were 6,000, of which Jeff received only a handful. And we received complaints, objections, that, well, it's going to take a long time to review those 6,000. And if you only have yourself to blame because your search was so overbroad. So he narrowed the search to make it objective and easier. Okay? Don't just get electrocuted.
Yeah.
He narrowed the search so that we can remove any judgment as to what's required. And furthermore, we heard after he narrowed the search, certain documents began to come out. As they came out, it seems fortuitously, after certain events occurred, like the filing of the Article 78 proceedings, like the filing of Mr. Finer's decision. Right at the time of the filing of Mr. Finer's decision, for example, which was on May 8th or so, documents were released 10 minutes before that decision was made public. And the documents that were released bore on the issue of the objections that were filed. But we couldn't raise them with the supervisor to show him that his decision was wrong because the documents were released too late. Then, when the Article 78 was filed, just so happens that you released more documents that showed, among other things, as Jeff pointed out, that the supervisor had in fact received the petition a week before he said he did, and that the town attorney's office had instructed town personnel to not tell anybody that had happened. And we have that document. It's right here. So it looks like the process that's supposed to be objective, not tainted with politics, has been anything but. So the purpose of having the objective search terms is to eliminate the discretion. Now what we're hearing, and by the way, with all due respect, Francis, we also heard that you yourself were undertaking a search of what Tim had done to make sure that everything that was called for was in fact produced. And I can understand why you'd want to do that, because these circumstances look very, very fishy. And so let me just reiterate a point that Jeff had made about why it's so important that there be a certification. The certification is by the town. It's got to be by somebody, it's under oath because it's a certification, by somebody with knowledge that a diligent search was conducted. And the impasse that I heard about last week was that Tim says, I'm not certifying anything. And Judith was saying, well, I didn't do the search, so I can't certify it was done diligently. So we were at an impasse. And in the meantime, we have this one email that from February 21, 2017, from Don Cannon that Jeff points out, where he specifically says Don Cannon, is relying on memos that he received from town department heads to Mr. Finer regarding incorporation and its impacts. And we don't have those memos. And if they were shared with Mr. Cannon, as Mr. Cannon says, and that he relied on them, and this document, which I'm sure you've seen, as has the public has seen this as well, shows that somebody outside the town has been given access to materials that the rest of the public can't see. Now, in the light of all the things that have happened thus far, the suspicious timing, the withholding of documents, the 6,000 that were supposedly This stack here obviously doesn't represent 6,000, and I
It
do,
represents 20, if anything.
whatever, 20 what?
20 emails where it just gets repeated because there's an email chain.
I accept the town attorney's offer to give us this entire stack because somebody's going to have to go through it to see whether there's something new in here that hasn't already been produced. Given what's happened, I would double check to make sure of that because I can't be sure. Nothing is numbered. There's no way to indicate what's been produced or not produced unless we compare it with what we've seen before. Believe me, when we see something new, it jumps out, and we make the public aware of it. But you've had this document from February 21st. You've known about it for months now. And he's talking about memos you haven't produced. So the certification becomes that much more important. Now, and then finally, let me just add one more thing. The Margaret Goldberg stuff. If you're taking the position that Margaret Goldberg, because she is an employee or an executive director of the Nature Center, that Margaret Goldberg is an agent of the town and therefore comes with an interagency, well, okay, that's your position. But she's on this committee because you produced documents to show she's on this committee because she's an Edgemont resident and she's leading the effort to be opposed to a corporation. That is her right as a resident to do that. But if you're going to be taking the position that she's a town employee, that puts her participation in an entirely different light. Why? Because you have two state controller opinions that says that town personnel are not supposed to be involved in that kind of activity. So if you're going to take the position that she can't, if it has her name on it, she's on the distribution list, and we therefore can't see these documents, then you're taking the position that the town can violate the state controller opinions with impunity. I mean, have you discussed this? Is that your opinion? Is that your position? We're trying to have these meetings here, this appeal, not for the purpose of creating disputes, but for the purpose of trying to resolve them. And it seems to me that I've raised issues that, deserve a response. If there's air to be cleared, let's clear it. But right now, there's a lot of smoke.
I just want to mention, since I've been supervisor, I've always invited the executive director of the Nature Center to attend all our department head meetings, and that's been going on for years, even before this whole incorporation battle, started. So, Margaret Goldberg, just like has been invited to every meeting that every other department head has been invited to.
If that's a basis, I mean, that's not true. That's true. Position.
No, it's true.
It's great. If that's true, then what you're saying is you're wrong. You've got another problem.
Okay, well, I'm just telling you that's true.
But Margaret has taken the position that 1/3 of her salary is paid for by the town, that she's hired not by the town board, but by the board of directors of the not-for-profit that runs the Nature Center.
Nanitucks.
Nanitucks. And if you're saying that...
I've invited her as a courtesy because...
But the issue is...
This is just
but it's true, but the thing is I've had...
Your invitation of somebody to a meeting does not make them an employee that enjoys privilege, Paul. You know that.
Well, I don't know that because basically I've been...
You're a lawyer, right?
I basically, at the department heads, I try inviting anyone who's associated with, with the town. I've invited Sarah Gracie White, to department head, meetings. Times I basically try getting as much input about town matters as,
Paul, this is irrelevant. You're just taking.
I don't. It's not irrelevant. I'm just telling you why. Because basically, I'm telling you what I've done. I'm not looking. I'm looking to get input from.
I'm looking to get a certain.
Mr. Sherring, you're disrespectful. When Mr. Bernstein spoke, nobody interrupted him. When we speak, you're always interrupting us. And that's not respectful. It doesn't lead to resolving the disputes that Mr. Bernstein talks about resolving. You have to control that. Let Mr. Feiner speak, Then you speak. We won't interrupt.
Yeah, and basically what, as I've suggested, I said I feel you should send Mr. Freeman a disc with the things that you've rejected. Releasing. Ask him if he would basically agree with your interpretation. There may be things that he disagrees with or agrees with, and if he basically disagrees, I basically would like to be as open as possible. So if he basically disagrees and says something should be released, I'll say release it. No matter what. Because I don't have anything to hide. I'm basically
Can I just raise my hand at this point? Because I don't want to filibuster our way through this entire meeting.
I'm just telling you my view.
Is the law that once this hearing is over, it all goes to Mr. Freeman and he's the judge for all of this?
I would like to get
is that the law? Is that the law?
The law is basically we're making a decision. The town board basically has to make a decision. I want to get the input of Mr. Freeman because I feel that he.
I understand what you want. I'm asking you what the law is. Can you answer the question of what the law is? What's the law?
The law is the town board will make a decision.
Okay.
You will get a certification. If you disagree with that certification, you'll file an article.
Can we talk about the certification for a second? What is the nature? Is the certification going to be the same thing you described in the town clerk's office? You did the diligent search. You're not going to provide the certification because the town clerk requested all the departments to actually perform the search, and she only got back what she got back. She's going to provide the certification based upon the information that she's got. Yes. Do you understand that is akin to a street corner deal? Because effectively, what you're saying to me is somebody goes to one person and says, this is the thing that I want, provides the money. That person sends a signal to another person and says, give this person the contraband. And there is an implicit trust between those two parties, and yet there is a denial that you can have in front of an authority. So what you're doing is you're saying, I've done the search, I'm not going to tell the town clerk what the results of my search were, and it's up to her to provide you a certification based upon only the information that she has. And that doesn't actually give me a certification of value. The value comes when you can make a representation, when the town can make a representation, that together you've done the search and you've provided me with all of the documents together. Otherwise, this is like a street deal.
Right, so I'm going to make a certification to the town clerk that I performed a diligent search, which I did.
Okay.
And then she's going to give you a certification that she received that information from me, and based on the information that she received from me and other department heads and employees who searched, that she's given her
certification. Will she
certification.
staple that certification to my certification?
We'll discuss that.
Okay, that's positive. Thank you. That's different from what you said earlier.
I think in terms of substance, the certification is critically important because there are documents referenced here that we haven't seen yet. And I'm hoping, that those of you on the town board, having heard me describe these problems and describe the gaps in the production and the piecemeal way in which it's been produced, and the unusual timing of this production, will undertake to satisfy yourselves that a diligent search was undertaken, particularly when there are references to memos that were distributed to Mr. Cannon on the subject of Edgemont's incorporation by department heads, which clearly would be germane to the responsive to the request and very germane. The public would like to see these things. We would like to see them and see what they have to say, because Mr. Cannon is relying on them to disseminate information to the community. Why on God's earth would you want to keep that confidential and not produce it? I would think you would, particularly since we've been asking for it for months, and it's been responsive to the requests, and it's not covered by interagency because Mr. Cannon has it. What have you done to search for those documents? Have you determined that that Tim's comments about there being 6,000 documents was true? Have you seen a disk with 6,000 documents on it? Have you seen
have you guys seen that? You guys seen the 6,000 documents? Just tell me. Like, you
I rely on the advice of counsel.
Okay, so you're saying that that you won't answer the question as to whether you saw 6,000 pages of documents because your attorney made the representation publicly? I mean, I realize, Ken, you're an attorney, but, at some point this becomes somewhat of a stretch. We were all in the room together, here. It's on videotape. He represented that there were 6,000 pages. He said it was going to take him a long time to review the stuff. We tried in good faith to help him by narrowing the search terms, but we haven't seen.
And he actually said that over July 4th weekend, you all had the 6,000 documents to review yourself. He said it. So, you're nodding your head, you're saying, I plead the fifth. What's going on here? Have you looked at the most recent FOIA that I submitted? Have you seen how narrow it is? I can read it to you. All documents and correspondence.
We've seen it. You don't have to read.
Well, the public should hear it, I think. All documents and correspondence from the IT department, attorney's office, supervisor's office, police, public works, parks and rec, containing those subjects, Edgemont quotes, and within 25 words, either the word village or incorporation or incorporates, through July 12th of this year, and the attached list of recipients in the following sheet. And that following sheet we have here, it's got all the members of the EIC, it's got all the members of anybody who's been an objector, all the people that you've hired, all the people during the petition process, and anybody who's and we're looking for non-public information. The results of this search would require no review for legal purposes for the exemption under public officers law. It literally should take 5 minutes to construct this search and run it. The only review that would be required would be to look at the substance of the emails and figure out whether or not it was politically problematic for you or criminal. Criminal. So tell me, when you've read this that I have sent now several times over, do you look at this and say, this is too hard for us to do? We're paying our MIS office too little money to actually construct and perform this search? Do you believe that you guys are being open? You're following open government practice? Tell me.
Okay, so gentlemen, we spent a significant amount of time on this issue. We think we understand what you're asking. The town board has heard you. The supervisor has outlined how he's going to proceed. As you can see, we have some other business in here we have to conduct.
When should I expect a decision and a certification?
I'll be able to tell you that today after I speak to the town board about some of the legal issues involved with the request. And I will send you an email today to tell you when you can expect that.
I'll get an email with an ETA of the decision for certification for my March 17th.
Yes, you will.
Okay, we all heard that.
Yep. So I thank you both for coming. And
will it be this year?
Talking to you again.
Well, let me also add that these requests are continuing, as you know, and it's important to clear the air. There's a lot that's been printed in the newspapers. There's a lot of suggestion about improprieties that have occurred here. It would go a long way toward clearing the air if you were candid and came forward with the production of the documents, including, for example, communications concerning the retention of Tom Toretti, including the documents concerning that second Article 78 lawsuit, your communications with Mr. Siegel regarding that, communications with Mr. Siegel regarding his unusual assessed value on his home, doesn't include his house, communications concerning his robocalls concerning his latest his survey, what his polling, he's doing a push poll now. All of these things Edgemont residents are seeing unfold in front of their eyes. They're seeing it in the newspapers. And they're seeing that we're asking for the information, and they're seeing your response. And I'm asking you to undertake to do your due diligence to make sure that when we get that certification on behalf of the town, that you can stand behind it and can say with conviction that everything that's responsive has in fact been produced, that nothing has been withheld unless it's been withheld pursuant to a bona fide agency exemption or privilege, and that you have satisfied yourself that the search was in fact made diligently and that nothing was withheld because it was politically embarrassing or worse, incriminating.
I just want to make it clear. So all of those individual issues that you just itemized, those are all contained in the latest revised search that we will run.
Yeah, but no search
As I mentioned at the
previous
very
search.
beginning, which you seem to pass right over, is that I was questioning why are we here when there's a revised search with narrowed search terms.
It's not revised, they're independent.
Listen, did you hear what Mr. Turner said? I mean, Mr. Turner. Mr. Lewis said, when we speak, you interrupt. When you speak, we don't interrupt. All I'm saying is, I want to be clear as to what you just rattled off a whole series of events. If we do the search on your revised search terms, the ones that you mentioned, it should take 5 minutes to do, that will capture all that was just mentioned here at this meeting. That is what you're looking for? Or are we going to get, after we leave here, another revised search or a search for something now for the future as opposed to, let's do another revised? I don't know when the revision ends that we could say, okay, this is what the appeal is upon. That is the issue.
That's not the issue. Let's be really clear. No FOIL request is a revision of a previous request. If you want to take every FOIL, there's about a dozen of them now, and make a decision on each one of them, that's what your job is. One doesn't supersede another one. These aren't amendments. They're individual. You're obliged under the law to deal with each one of them individually. So you don't get to sit there and say, because there's now a July 15th one, we don't have to look at the July 12th one. Sorry. The July 15th one, as I wrote in the email, was there out of an abundance of caution to pick up any additional information that may have happened since the last release of FOIL documents.
So when you state in an email that it's a revised search, you're saying it's not a revised search, it is another search to be done in addition to the prior searches?
They're all individual FOIL requests. I only made one revision based upon the advice that I got from the town clerk. And that original one was made on the advice from the town clerk, which that was a conversation that was totally understandable. Like, it was designed so that it wouldn't be onerous, and we understood the reason for that, for reaching into the future, so that we could avoid missing any of that. But none of those documents, none of those FOIL requests are revisions of the previous one, with the exception of the one where it was determined that it was invalid.
So if each one is a revision of the prior one...
No. I'm sorry to interrupt.
If every one still stands, then that means that the request that the Committee on Open Government Director Bob Freeman said was too broad, that still stands, and you want us to continue to do the broad search. Okay. It was my understanding that you were narrowing the search terms so that we would get to a point where we would then use those search terms, where I thought we were, use those revised search terms to search all the documents, not narrowing the number of documents, but search all those documents, but do it on the revised search terms. Instead, what I'm hearing is do it on the revised search terms, but also do it on all the prior search terms and FOILs that we have submitted, and we would like those as well. It's not clear to me. I thought we had clarity in that these are the terms you want us to search, and if you can do that search, that would be great. Now what I'm hearing is it's not a revised search, it is a continuation. No, I'm sorry. It is a new search, and all the prior searches are still in full force and effect, and we expect a response to those as well, even if they're too broad.
Yeah, I'm looking for 12 decisions from you, and if one of them is, this is too broad, then fine, then we can take that and deal with that. And if one, But you are obliged to give me, at this point, like a dozen decisions.
Certification is with respect to each. And the reason that's so important, I keep emphasizing, is that there are gaps. Based on what you produce, there are gaps. And if, therefore, you either are going to produce those documents or search for them, and it's not like we're fishing. They're spelled out in documents. They refer to other documents. It's not hard. And it doesn't take search terms to go and figure out, gee, what are they asking for? If the document you produced refers to other documents that the guy has looked at and you haven't produced them, how hard is that for you to go look for and get? I mean, considering all the people involved in this, it shouldn't be very hard at all. But the main thing is, because of the seriousness of the nature of these inquiries, because of the legal issues involved underlying all of this, which I'm sure your attorney has shared with you, it's critically important that you certify, that we get the certification, that everything that is responsive has been produced following a diligent search, and that there's nothing further to be found. That is what you're required to do. That is what Bob Freeman has suggested we ask you to provide for each of the requests that have been made, so that there's at least a record that the town, for what it's worth, believes that it has undertaken a diligent search and everything responsive that's not withheld on grounds of an exemption has in fact been produced. If you can do that, then we will have made some progress.
Right, and again, I just want to reiterate, from my standpoint, I would like to give as much information that I think everything that they're entitled to, they should have, and if there's a gray area, I'd rather err on the side of giving the information than not. That's my own personal opinion. I also feel that I've always been of the opinion that that anything that's emailed is people will be able, by one way or another, have access to. I mean, if you look at Hillary Clinton's emails, I mean, it all became disclosed. If you look at everything that goes on in the national level, people know how to get into the emails, so people are gonna see it no matter what. So I'd rather just assume that everything we're emailing is basically public. I also feel because I realize that there are legal restrictions. I just personally would feel comfortable letting Mr. Freeman at least take a look, so we could. So this way, if there is a legal action at some point, we could show that we erred on the side of of trying to produce the records. If he checks it and says, you know what, we're not doing everything humanly possible, then we'll go that extra mile. I mean, he could hopefully Mr. Freeman could also watch this this video and hear some of the comments you made and give us thoughts, so we could be extra careful.
At the very least, then, I think we want to reconsider the decision in light of what Mr. Feiner said about withholding the communications that were had with Margaret Goldberg, because if anything clouds the issue, it's telling us that, we're considering Margaret Goldberg to be a town employee for purposes of withholding documents that are otherwise responsive, when Margaret Goldberg is a resident of Edgemont and has been in charge of, with others, of the anti-incorporation effort. Using that as a shield is suggesting to me that you're trying to cover something up, and the very opposite of what Mr. Feiner just suggested. Reconsider that.
And if you really want to go the extra mile, when there's specific evidence here that says that this is based almost entirely on our meeting with you and memos from you, then you would go back to Don Cannon, who's the chair of your board of assessment review, and say, can you give me the documents that you referenced here so that I can produce them? That would be the extra mile. But that's not what we're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Let's get a copy of those documents. Which documents? You can have them all.
Which ones you
Yeah.
No review memo.
Did you go to college with Tom Troy?
No,
Really? Because he was there at the same time you were.
no, I went to law school with the chief judge of the state court of appeals, who let me my notes.
I think what they're saying is they're doing background research.
Yeah, they're trying to see if you had some issues with it. That was like a backdoor question.
I don't remember going.
But that's difficult.